Anyway,
Got
so
it.
what? I'll go ahead and check in first, and we'll see whether RZ shows up or not. And deal with him when he gets here. But I'll just keep it very short and say I'm excited about the meeting tonight. I've been involved with a social group for 5 or 6 years where we meet every 4 times a month, and I just quit last week. Quit that group, and that has a lot of implications, and it's really given me a lot to think about. And I think we'll probably end up talking about some of it tonight, just because it's interesting stuff, even though it's not like on my agenda exactly. So anyway,
It's not like you're what, Gordon? What'd
on
you
my
say?
agenda. It's not
Okay.
really. I mean, I don't really need to talk about it, but I think it'll come up in our discussion. So we'll see.
What was the name of the social group?
Well, we called ourselves the Tribe, and we were based on a book by um, uh, Bill. What's his name? Bill and Zoe. What were their names? Gosh, I forget their names. Anyway, it was based on it's a social group based on a book by this guy who's a kind of one of the founders of the New Warriors.
The
Anyway,
idea is everybody belongs to a tribe, right? That's the idea.
well, actually, it's interesting. It's a good question. No, it's that we have families, and I'll just explain this briefly, but I think it's fun. It's very interesting. We have families, and in our families, we, you can get divorced or you can push people away in your family, but the truth of the matter is families are all about marriages and kids, and they don't really end. And there's no way you can kick somebody out of your family, but they're still actually your cousin, or whatever. I mean, family is not, and at family, when the uncle who comes to Thanksgiving dinner and wants to go on some racist rant, you don't like say, "Well, you're not my uncle anymore." You're just so you have to deal with stuff in family. In tribe, it's all about choice. We interact with each other by choice. We don't actually have to be in the tribe. Nobody's required to be in it. You don't like get in for genetic reasons. It's
You
not
can
about
be banished.
what.
You can be banished.
Well, sure, but only from the standpoint of we don't share your values. And that's all it is. It's all about. So that's what this book, the book about the tribe, is all about how do people of shared values start a group together in which the only thing you share in common is your values. And you don't share lifestyle. You're not married. You're not family. You're not maybe necessarily working together. You don't have anything other going with each other except for you all share the same values. And that's what the group was. And I quit because I don't share the same values. And that came up pretty clearly to me. So
Ah, ah.
all right, so that was my check. That was great. That was a very good check-in. Took 4 minutes. I think everybody take a couple of minutes and check in, and then we'll start.
I've already told you what I'm up to right now. I'm on my days off. I go back to work on Wednesday, back to my job in Delta, Utah, which is about an hour and a half to the west of me. And that job is kind of wrapping down in terms of the hours that I spend because they're cutting back. It'll go into 2022 in some fashion, but there may be the need to get other work. So I'm trying to get all my house projects done in 2022, and my life is basically pretty simple. I go to work, I come home, I eat, I sleep, I read books. I've just been reading this Robert Moore book, Douglas Gillette book, as a kind of entertainment. Entertainment. I consider it a good read, and very happy to be here with you gentlemen tonight in this read.
Thank you.
Ed, are you married?
I am. I have a daughter, 16-year-old daughter, and my wife and I have been together for about 17 years now.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. And they live with you? They
What's
live with
that?
you?
My wife?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we live here together, and then
So
when
you
I,
can just come home and read books.
well, yeah, I have a marriage life, and my wife is, she's got her own interests, and actually, she read the book too. She read King, Warrior, Magician,
Oh,
Lover
cool.
at my recommendation that she read it.
Oh, cool.
That's
Okay,
cool.
thanks. Thanks.
Thank you, Ed.
I will check in. Let's see. Let's just say here, it's my home in my weekend in Brawley, and you know, everything's going good. I guess I just want to talk about the book, so I'll just drop any more
All right. Well, I
hints
have
of
okay.
check-in.
Thank you, Orville. I appreciate that. I'm excited about the book too, and I'm willing to try to jump into it because I did not prepare a PowerPoint presentation, which seems to be like the cool thing to do, but I didn't go there. Instead, what I did was, and first off, I wanted to just really thank you, Orville, for your provocative two emails. You know, the first one with the 4 parts, and the second one with just the oh, by the way, which I thought was cool. Uh, but I actually thought about it quite a bit and prepared kind of a thoughtful. It allowed me to give a thoughtful introduction to what I want to say tonight, and then after my introduction, I'll just pass it around for like conversation. But let me do my introduction first because you know, yeah, I want to go. I don't know if you have the book. Do you guys have the book handy? All right, very good. Well, turn to the preface because that's where I want to start. Um, and if you just look at the preface, in the preface, the authors mention that this book is a simplification of Jung's work decoding the double quaternario archetypal self. Um, do either of you guys know what the fuck that is? Because that is what the simplification. This book is the simplification of Jung's quaternarian thing, and the reason why I want to start the conversation out is because I know what that is, and I can explain it really simply, but it's not
I
necessarily
do not.
okay. Well, I do, and here's the idea that Jung had, and it's very interesting because what Jung said is that personalities are are divided into dualities, and so one of the dualities of personality is like the king and the queen, and another duality might be the 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 high priestess and the magician. So the high priestess being the feminine and the magician being the masculine, or another one might again the king and the queen, or the and Jung went on and on and talked about how all of our personalities are all of these multiple dualities, and then he got into this whole thing where why does the cross show up in all of these different cultures all around the world. Of course, it's Christian. The Christian cross is very important, but the cross is important in almost every culture throughout history. Crosses are always important. Why? And Jung decided, and again, this is just Jung's thing. I don't know if you. I mean, this book is these guys are Jungian, and that's what they're basing it on. Jung's thing was that there's this quaternary of dual uh, opposing principles that operate within all human consciousness, and that you can divide them up in a bunch of different ways. One of them is being like the king and the queen, but the another one is like the magician and the high priestess, and another one would be the hierophant and the fool, and another one might be the the most high spiritual, and then the most foolish whatever. And Jung had all of these different divisions of twos, and he said that it was very important that in cultures, all cultures have have a cross, have a cross of some kind between, and in Western culture it's heaven and earth are the right and left, and then chronological time is horizontal. So we have the hierarchy between heaven and earth, and we have the what do you call it? The branches, the arms are linear time, which we mark in terms of things from us from like we're in year 2021. We're 2,221 years since the Christian period. And we mark time in that way. And we can talk about the 15th and the 16th and the 17th and the 18th and the 20th and the 30th and the 31st century in terms of time, in terms of this linear time that goes this way, horizontal. So Jung said that these two realities that we live in, the hierarchical time of what's important and the horizontal time of how long things take, creates this cross, and that you can plug in all these different things into that cross, but you always get the same cross. And what these guys are saying is that the cross is made up of the king and the warrior and the lover and the magician. That those are the things that he's going to like focus on, and he calls it an improvement over Jung. Whether it is or an improve isn't or is not an improvement, it's based on Jungian psychology, but that's what the point was. Okay, so that was my introduction to the book and why the book was important to me, because I am a Jungian. I'm very deep into Jung.
Gordon, I take it these guys are psychotherapists, Jungian
Yes,
inspired psychotherapists.
inspired psychotherapists. They're high-end academics. I mean, that's
As
they're,
they talk about their patients and particular case studies, right?
yes, exactly. Yeah, that's where they come from. They come from academia.
So Jung never actually identified the double quaternary in terms of specific archetypes.
He ended up with 12 different types, and based on three different levels of ego development. I mean, it's Jung's model is very complicated. And in fact, Orville, you mentioned your thing about Myers-Briggs. You know that Myers-Briggs is Jungian. That's where it came from.
Yes.
That's how they got the whole concept of personality types and whatnot. They took Jung and just massaged it into this thing. And it's not that different from the king, warrior, magician, lover concept. I will say this, Orville, that they're not stereotypes. They're archetypes, and that there is a difference. A stereotype is.
Could you speak to that, please?
Yeah, I will. I will. I thought quite a bit about your question about it, and here's what I want to go back to the introduction to the book, because I think that what
The preface?
yeah, no, not the preface, the introduction. There's a preface and then there's an introduction.
All right.
Okay, and in the introduction, they say that the book was written. There's a question introduced as, where are all the initiated men
What
of power
page?
today? Okay,
What page
and
are you on?
yeah, okay. It's in the introduction. It's after the acknowledgement. It's like page 15 in Roman script.
Yeah, XV F15.
Yeah, right. Okay. And he starts with this very interesting rap where he says, during a Bill Moyers recent interview. Bill Moyers, as you know, was famous for interviewing Carl Jung, and I mean he's got Bill Moyers is a fairly famous guy anyway for doing these kind of interviews. And he interviewed Robert Bly, and a young man asked the question, where are all the initiated men of power today? We have written this book in order to answer this question, which is on the minds of both men and women. I think that if you don't understand why they wrote the book, then the book's totally useless. You have to get where that they're socio-political theorists, and they have come to a conclusion that Western civilization is fucking dying or just coming apart at the seams, and they have a solution. And their solution is to educate the population about the nature of initiated men in power. That's what that is. And if you don't believe that, like you go, okay, that's way too foo-foo for me. I don't go there, then of course the book's meaningless because it isn't a book for everybody. It's not like it is you have to share their belief, which is based in academia. I mean, that's the whole thing. Male, they're white college educated men, and they are coming up to this intellectual conclusion that the fall of Western civilization is because because boys are not getting initiated into being men of power. That's the whole fucking problem with this thing that you see going on out there that you don't like. And it's not political, it's not religious, it's not economics, it is actually Jungian. It's a Jungian concept of the social situation that we're in. And Jung diagnosed it, 100 years ago. 100 years ago, right now, Jung was coming up with his basic theories of Western civilization and what was going on. And that was also like right around the time of World War I. And Jung looked around and went, okay, there's weird shit going on. And you know what? It's still going on today. It's not, it hasn't, it's only been advanced by very small amounts since what Jung said. I mean, we are really basically living in a post-Jungian conceptual reference frame for all this stuff, which includes when you said astrology, Orville, and Myers-Briggs. Astrology today is Jungian. That's all. I mean, I don't know what it was 100 years ago, but today when you do astrology and they talk about it's all about archetypes and the nature of the psyche being as Jung described it. Yeah. Okay.
So I understand. I mean, I read the book. I understand the basic premise of the book, and as you have just described it,
Yeah.
I agree. I understand. That is where they're coming from. That's their sort of analytical framework, I will call it. And it just to, I felt like I put it number 5 because I thought it was the least important. But if we're going to adopt some arbitrary systems, why this one and not some other one? I thought was a worthwhile question. I admit I've never really got into astrology. I couldn't tell you really whether they're Jungian or not. I have no idea. I've always rejected astrology on multiple levels. So, and I agree that Myers-Briggs is Jungian because this guy in HR in my company got really excited about Myers-Briggs and made everybody do it. So I read up about it, and to me, yes, it's Jungian. My impression was, and this is maybe harsh, but I forget whether it's Myers or Briggs. This lady just made it up. It was my understanding. She just made it up. There's no empirical basis, the theoretical basis, just like she made it up. So, but to me, it's just like an arbitrary analytical framework. And I don't really want to dwell on it because I thought it was the least important of my questions.
But first off, Orville, thank you for sharing that, and I think that's consistent with what I understood. And I'll just say for myself, and again, this is why I chose this book, and I get that you're not seeing it the way I see it, and that's fine. That's why I chose this book, is because for me, this book opened up a whole lot of questions that I had that I felt finally I'd gotten some kind of answer to things, and that I really do feel like it advanced my spiritual and intellectual growth, even to the point where I understand that most of my choices in life are not really based on um, what you might call rational or empirical data or reasoning. That most of my choices really come down to fulfilling archetypal patterns. Like I'm mostly, although occasionally I realize that that's not always the case. Like sometimes I transcend those archetypes and I enter into a period of intense growth and development where I develop intellectually and spiritually and emotionally at a very rapid rate. And the archetypes like shift, they break apart and they're no longer useful. And then later on, maybe new archetypes might appear, but there's been a shift and something has happened. And so I recognize both of these processes that I'm mostly fulfilling archetypal images and programs and just following the program that's inside me of what I would call my preferences, things I like, things that work for me. It's good. It works. I'm happy, whatever it is. Most of those things that work for me, they're fulfilling some archetypal image. And then every once in a while, it just all breaks apart. It shatters. Shit doesn't work. I'm unhappy and things have to grow and I pop and change. And then a whole new set of archetypes appear and a whole new set of like preferences kind of show up. And as I've watched this process take place over and over and over again, maybe 6 times in the last 15 years, maybe 7 times in 25 years. I don't know. It doesn't, it's hard to say. Every couple of years shit happens and just kind of blows my mind. And I kind of wake up and I'm no longer the same person that I was. I kind of feel like one of the things is that I don't want to say I hated my parents, but I'll just bring my parents into it for a bit. Like I noticed my parents didn't do this. And I always wondered why. And I always and now that I'm older and can kind of get it, I know why. It's fucking hard. It's just fucking
And
it takes a lot, it takes a lot of energy.
this they didn't do is some kind of level of introspection.
Continuous personal growth work.
Okay.
What I would say, Orville, is that while I am no big fan of therapy, I'm not. I don't have a therapist. I don't go to one. I've spent most of my adult life in what I would call interpersonal therapy sessions with friends
Right.
like you and I think even that with you and Orville and I mean with you and RZ and now Ed, you joining us, I kind of realized that these sessions, they're therapeutic for me. Like I actually need this to achieve psychological balance in my life. And that is a um
But you do a lot of work, like your own sort of work or processing,
exactly. I do a lot on my
journaling,
own. I do a lot
or
on my own.
other techniques, and then you do other intensives or courses. So there's a lot besides just,
Yeah, no, like I said, you're right, Orville, and like I say, it's an ongoing project. I I am an ongoing project. I am not stuck.
yeah,
My parents were complete, just to kind of give you an idea of my parents, but not to talk about my parents. I'm not interested in them, but they're a nice counterpoint because their whole theory was you reach like your pinnacle at the earliest age possible, and then you stay that way forever. You reach some kind of adult self, and that person is the person that you live with for the rest of your life until you die. That you do not change. In fact, to change is to admit some kind of shameful error of because why didn't you get there sooner? you know. And whereas me, I'm totally process oriented, and it's like fuck, I'm not. I don't. I don't know if I'm going to live as long as my parents, but I'm going to process a fuck lot more.
So Gordon, if I were to answer this question of number 5, I would say like why the Jungian sort of paradigm, I don't know if that's paradigm's the right word, why the Jungian sort of archetypal schema, I guess reading from your answer is that it seems to work for you. It gives you answers. It explains things. Would you agree with that? I think I'm echoing
I
what you
think
just said.
I think that that's true as far as, from here to here. That's very true, Orville. But it also is true at another level, kind of down more towards the heart, it's satisfying emotionally. And I don't really need to add. You've got it right. Just include that emotional satisfaction is part of how good it feels. So yeah, you got it right.
In the West, as far as what we consider the West and Western culture, Freud basically articulated that we have an unconscious and that we're subject to this unconscious until we begin to process the unconscious, right?
Right.
You'd say that about Freud?
Yeah, that was Freud, and that was kind of where Jung and Freud both agreed.
Right. So they both are very much heirs of the Western culture, which would be the scientific approach. They're very much scientists in terms of their initial approach.
Absolutely. Freud and
research.
Jung were both academics at the highest level of intellectual development of their era. Yeah.
Right, right. So
trained in Zurich of all places. Went to the University of Zurich,
right.
What a place in 1900. Oh.
Yeah, yeah. And then what Jung's contribution at that point is to identify that there is a collective unconsciousness, a collective unconscious.
Right, a program of archetypes that we have as human beings that don't come from our experience. They're genetically programmed into us. Although he didn't have anything like genetics to lean on, but he had this idea that there were structural components of our psychic development which were pre-programmed, and they were common for all of humanity.
And so he would be the first one that articulated the collective unconscious.
Right, exactly.
He would be the first one. It's his contribution is that there is a collective unconscious.
That's correct. This idea that we've all got the same stuff.
Okay, so here's a question related to your understanding of this, Gordon. When in Jungian terms, we say we are not to identify with the archetype. Okay, you follow that statement?
I do, and I have a way of understanding it too.
Okay, so someone who is under an identification with the archetype becomes ego inflated. Their ego inflates. Is that correct?
Yeah. The whole thing about Jung and archetypes is you have to understand that when Jung uses the word archetype, he actually means archetypal image. Okay. That an archetype is actually the symbol that you use to interpret the archetype, but that's not the archetype. So, for example, a king, you imagine a king with a crown. Well, the image of the king with the crown is not the archetype. The archetype is the thing that creates the possibility of there being an image for which you have a specific image, like a guy sitting on a throne with a crown. That is an archetypal image. That's not an archetype.
Okay.
The archetype is something like an ethereal concept which we can only know through the image, through the symbol. And it is and what we can manipulate with our minds are the symbols, not the archetypes. The archetypes are pre-conscious. We cannot manipulate them. They're built into our system. What we can manipulate is the images that we use to symbolize them. And this is what Jung was trying to say as the collective unconscious is this underlying framework for which every person will create symbols for those things. And if you lived in the 1500s, you would have a very different image of a king than we have today, but it would still be the king.
Yeah.
Because the king is built in, because that has to do with survival. There's a
Yeah.
survival need that's met by having a superior male in your frame so that you can manipulate, oh, superior male, I have a very specific relationship with superior males, and you need to know what that is without somebody explaining it to you, because you will die if you don't know what that means. And that's why we have it. That's why it evolved. Our relationship to male, for example, a dominant male, that relationship that we know from as little tiny children and through our adult, all the way into our adult years, is built into us physiologically.
And Jung
Yeah.
just made all this up.
Well, again, he was a clinical psychologist. He interviewed thousands of people and listens to in his journals. There are something like 400,000 dream analysis scenarios that he went through with people. So that's
Right.
so the raw data are his dream analysis.
And Freud did lots of this, and he had a different idea.
Yeah, Freud did the same thing, but he had but he came to different conclusions with his own
Right,
data.
which to me, just looking at it is like, well, why is Jung right and Freud like less right? And some other guy or woman could interview 4,000 people and come
Yeah,
up
well,
with a different
Orville,
thing.
I tell you, Stanislav Grof had asked the same question and came up with the Enneagram. And I tell you, the one thing about the Enneagram, if you've ever studied it, Orville, it'll fucking nail your ass. I tell you, man, I read the Enneagram, several books on the Enneagram, and I was shocked. I was like, how can anybody know this shit about me? How can anybody know this stuff about me? They go through if you study the Enneagram, they will go through stuff and you know which number you are because you read all the numbers and you go, well, that one is definitely me. And then you start reading case studies of what those numbers mean. You go, fuck, I did that. I did that too. Oh, I do that. I'm like that. Hey, how could they know this shit? It's just a number. It's just a fucking number. And so all you can say is that there are some mechanisms, Orville, that underlie all this shit. And I understand how you can say, oh, well, it's all, it could be astrology or some or Myers-Briggs or anything else. But actually, there's some shit that actually works really well, and there's other shit that just doesn't work as well. And I have been personally trying to develop my own shit that just works for me, and it turns out I'm not as good as some of the other people that I'm trying to copy. I'm just not. I've actually thought that I should just do my own system, but it turns out to be very hard, and I've worked on it for 25 years, and it turns out to be like this is actually as I said when I recommended this book, I felt it was not intellectually challenging. He doesn't have quotes and references to all the basic Jungian material. You read Carl Jung in the primary, and it's fucking dense. Every fucking sentence you're just going, I don't know what he's fucking talking about. I don't know. This is actually palatable, and whereas the actual
I agree, it's accessible.
yeah, it's accessible. That's why I picked it, because I thought it was accessible. And I also picked it, of course, because RZ is so interested in personas, and he's not here right now, but I got to say that I picked this book for RZ, not for the two of you guys. I picked it because RZ's always talking about personas, and I was like, RZ, you got to like read some literature about like where does that concept of persona is a Freudian and Jungian concept, and there's a whole literature about this shit. And you really need to start at the basics and
I know,
understand how it works.
RC's trying to wing it, and it's not really developed.
No, he's got an idea of, I'm just saying that, look, there is a concept you're working with, but just stop calling it personas. It just confuses shit because we're getting into
All right.
stuff that is really where there's so
So
much literature on it.
I,
Just
it,
let the literature speak for itself.
so I understand what you're saying, that there is, first of all, that Jung based this on evidence, these sort of case histories of talking to people about how do you feel about your mother or whatever, your father,
Right.
and all this stuff. So, okay. And then further corroboration is that you just have a lot of, it's sort of, I like the word resonate. It sort of resonates for you on multiple levels. It just seems true for you on multiple levels,
Yeah.
emotional, intellectual levels. And then perhaps there's an evidentiary or epistemological basis corroboration that's possible, which we haven't really got into, but let's just assume that that's possible.
I think you're forgetting one part, Orville, and that
Yeah.
just that is that the tremendous amount of people who have verified this stuff who are anthropologists. And there's a lot of cross-cultural. This is not just Western culture. People have gone out into the Jungians go out into the Amazon, and out into the jungles to find and Africa, trying to find evidence of this
Aha.
stuff. I mean,
Right.
that's
So you find this anthropological recurrence, shall we say, this
exactly. So I just wanted
recreation.
to, I mean, just because you were
That's
talking
very
about
good.
where
That's
does it
very
all
good.
come from,
No, that's
and
important.
yeah, no, I
I
know it
think
is.
that's
That's why I brought it
another
up.
line of evidence that
Yeah,
supports this whole concept or
right.
paradigm. I'm not quite sure what the word is, but I'll
Yeah,
say paradigm.
it's a paradigm.
Okay, so if I may, um, I don't know if you have my email handy,
I
but
do, Orville.
and I have to admit, I'm kind of coming from my personal background.
Yeah, that's okay. I have
Um,
all four of your
yeah, I want to look at number one.
yeah, okay.
So what I'd like to do is kind of start from a very personal experience with this thing, which is that for me, growing up, and maybe had to do with my relationship with my father or my analysis of the culture. There was the Vietnam War, there was racism, and there was materialism. And I felt like this is all kind of the patriarchy. And I just felt like, man, it's really fucked up. And it's like, the society is totally fucked up. And to me, feminism offered a solution, like an alternative way of thinking about well, I mean, I don't want to say everything, but at least interpersonal relations and kind of the model for our way of being. And so, and this has to do with maybe my personal upbringing, but so there's this concept of masculinity, the sort of roles of masculinity, and like we should seek to be a king, we should seek to be a warrior, and all these things. And I just think, like, no, like these are like the cause of our problems. The people trying to be king, and the people seeking kings, and the people trying to be warriors, or just accepting war. This is the problem. And so to me, the solution was feminism, which is recognizing that, gosh, everybody, male or female, should be able to have compassion and feelings, and everybody should be able to have wisdom and accept and identify as leadership and practice leadership if that's appropriate in the moment and in their time of their lives. To me, it's like kind of a mistake to genderize, that's not the right word, to make it a gendered thing about leadership. Like, why do we call it a king? Why don't we call it leadership? So this is my first objection. of why don't we just cut out these archetypes and go directly to the qualities. And another word that I maybe should have used were values, which I didn't think of when I was writing this, but maybe values, but of leadership, wisdom, compassion. This is kind of like a whole nother dimension that you don't have to like make it a male thing or a female thing to feel compassion or leadership. So this is my number one objection to this whole system. So I would really like you to respond to this my line of thinking here.
Can I address that?
Sure.
So the way I understand this book is it was written in 1990, and these guys are Jungian analysts. Let's see, Douglas Gillette apparently was a pastor also, or a counselor. This is based upon the lectures of Robert Moore in 1990. So if we go back and start looking at what was life like in 1990, what was going on in the culture at 1990, and think about that. We had, let's see, we just had, trying to remember what happened in 1990 that was significant.
The Gulf
think,
War.
Okay.
Ended.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
fall of the Soviet Union,
Yeah.
1989.
But at that time, there was some
Germany unified.
there was some real strident voices coming out of the feminist movement that were basically not helpful to the development of boys in particular. And we're still in that crisis of how do boys develop and become masculine entities, which is it's a role. To be a man, or to be a male is a choice, and we have to develop masculine qualities if we are to be males that have some type of fulfillment of our own genetic heritage, right? So I look at this as, I'll say it like this, Orville, I look at these things as being part of the collective, okay? When we talk about these archetypes, we're talking about the collective, that they're available to the collective. They're available to we groups. So this we group right here, Gordon, Orville, Rick, me, we form a we group, and we could actually go out of this more generative after we finish this we group, because we access this power, this generating power, and we can identify that generating power as the king power, because that's the heritage that we have. That the king generates good to the realm. When there's a proper order, there's goodness to the realm. So I'm looking at this as collective, and we can call it by many different terms. The Jungian way of talking about it is pretty particular, and I do think it's a scientific approach. So I look at Jung as a scientist, and I know he got some things wrong, and I know that Robert Moore and Douglas Gillette got some things wrong, but overall, I appreciate their effort at 1990 to try to get something out there that would help males in a culture which male, the actual masculine entity, is being denigrated by strident voices, and I'm that's kind of where I'm at with this. That these are available to the collective if we want them, if we want to accept them. And then Gordon, you can answer now, Orville.
Yeah, no, first off, thank you. That was very informative, and I really appreciate what you just said. What I wanted to add to that, and I do think it's just kind of adding to it. I don't want to repeat everything you said, was that the the patriarchy is a political system that's enforced with violence. That's the definition of it's a political system of male domination that's enforced with violence, and that that boys dream of being the patriarch, and that's what the king means to to be when they're a boy. And when you're a man, you become anti-patriarchal, and you recognize that 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 we are all human beings, and that dominance and control of the feminine is disastrous. That what you want to do is learn to appreciate and love the feminine and support it rather than control it and dominate it. And that difference between the boy understanding of the king and the mature understanding of the king, it takes an initiation. It takes adult men telling boys, hey, you know what? You got it fucking wrong. That's not what it's about. You need to stop that behavior and start respecting women differently and seeing them differently than the way you see them. And that problem is that that's great when you're talking about a 40-year-old man talking to a 14-year-old boy. It's not so good when a 40-year-old man is talking with his other 40-year-old buddies who are still 14 years old and never got that lecture. And that's what the book is about. It's like saying, we're fucked up here. We have got to change the way boys turn into men, because what we end up with is a bunch of 40-year-old boys, and that's not a good thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, so I guess my response to this 40-year-old boys was feminism, which is recognizing that, which is a sort of, maybe I'll call it a paradigm, where everyone needs to learn, compassion. Everyone needs to have experience the capacity for leadership, instead of thinking about kings and warriors.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't think we have to call the reason why it's helpful to call it king, warrior, magician, lovers, because we have this rich literature and cross-cultural demonstration from the time of recorded history that we can draw on. And that's what I think I appreciate the most about Robert Morris, how broad he was in his ability to dive into the evidence from the cross-cultural studies.
Right. Right. And yeah, I agree. And you know, I guess, Orville, that what I would say is, from the we're getting to the end of the hour here, is take what works for you from the book and disregard the rest. That's kind of, I mean, that would be my assessment. And with that, having said that, unless there's more to say, I feel complete with the book. I mean, that was the whole reason for reading the book, was to have this discussion. It doesn't mean that we can't go on, in weeks, infinitum, but I don't really see that. In fact, I'm more interested in um I'm more interested in the process, actually. I kind of you kind of see what happened when Orville wrote the last essay about hate, and I got into that really heavily, and that was a lot of fun for me to really rip up Orville's statements and go, what do I think Orville means in every sentence? Just what do I think he means, without trying to respond at all, because, for one thing, I didn't feel Orville really was asking for a response. He was, I don't want to say blowing some steam, but he was just taking some ideas of his and rambling about them a little bit. Whereas, and I got to say that it might be fun to go back to maybe, some of the things we've said already, some of our old essays about spirituality, and kind of go, well, what did you really mean by that shit? I know that you've, Orville, you've challenged me many on many levels about my spiritual beliefs, and I feel like I've gone through a transformation where I have a better understanding of it now, and I feel like I can lead, having especially having read this book. I think I can lead now with a more sympathetic understanding on your part of my of the stuff I just make up. Because I think you got it right, Orville. I think that you finally got it. Like Jung just made it up. Myers and Briggs just made it up. And indeed, Orville, we all just make it up. So the question is not whether or not making it up is a good idea or not, because the brightest people on the whole fucking history of the 20th century recognized that they were just making it up. That's how they did it. Everybody's done it that way. So you can go back and say, well, I'm too smart to make it up. But actually, that doesn't like indicate intelligence at all. In fact, the most intelligent people, I think, make it up. That's what they do. Everybody makes it up. And if you're not intelligent enough to make it up, you have to like follow somebody else's making it up. But somebody made it up. So why not you?
Well, and then hearkening back to Haidt, I mean, what he looked for was some kind of validation or verification in, if you're going to go by the science thing, yeah, you make up something, but then you seek to have some kind of,
All right. So I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say, Orville,
and that's fine.
that is why I'm in this group. I am seeking validation
Yeah,
for my spirituality. That is in
right.
fact right. And if you say, nah, Gordon, I don't buy it. Those shamanic masters you talk about, I don't know. They don't seem real to me. It seems like you just made them up. Okay, well, that part I can handle. I get that I just made them up. The question is, do they work? Does it actually work?
Yeah.
Look, wouldn't
I
you
want
say
to,
it's
I'd
like
like to add,
this?
oh, go ahead, Ed.
No, I would say we could use the word interpretation, okay? And we're doing an interpretation exercise all the time. We're always interpreting. And interpretation is one of the fabrics of the universe, okay? And when we understand that we're interpreting experience, and what then we could have is a mutual experience. Okay, so I'm looking at you two gentlemen, and I'm looking at two kings, two warriors, two magicians, two lovers. So I'm also a king, a warrior, a magician, a lover. Okay, I have this experience. So we're mutual. We're confirming with each other our experience. Could we become more generative in certain ways to each other? Would there be a way for us to be more loving towards each other, more magical in offering each other the gifts of our own spiritual development? Yeah, this could develop into a very useful way to get validation with each other about our experience and how we're interpreting it. That's what we're really talking about, Gordon. Don't you agree that we're talking about?
I totally agree. This is what I would say is the underlying or the meta discussion of why this group is important and why I said when I started that, I'm kind of in what I would just call long-term therapy.
Yeah,
It's kind of it's because it's therapeutic to me. It
right.
gives me it gives me inspiration when I go out into the world in which not everybody agrees about anything. You know, I can
Yeah,
at least have this sense of I have grounded myself in a community of ideas and people who understand what it is that I am at least imagining that I'm doing as I'm making it up through my life. You know, and people go, yeah, well, we witnessed that, and there are some things that don't make any sense to us, and that's good. That would be, it's like, yeah, okay, I kind of do have to kind of explain myself there. you know?
I want to say, Gordon, I've really enjoyed this book and exploring the concepts or the ideas, or whatever we want to call them. It has given me great pleasure in reading this book and thinking about it and reflecting on it, one additional thing that I would add, in my job, I'm a supervisor, and I really see, like, when he's talking about the king and seeing people, he has this sort of scenario where there's like a king and then people come into the court and he sees them. Like, I really resonated with that in my role as a supervisor, especially with the younger employees. I thought, oh yeah, that's right. I really see myself in this role. And I never would have called it king. Technically, I'm called a supervisor. I listened to this podcast, and this guy who has a lot of experience with business was saying, he just sort of blurted out this, like, gosh, the one thing companies could really do was to give like a really in-depth performance review to young employees. They crave this. And I heard that and I go, oh, right, that's right. And I took that to heart. And to me, it's exactly like this archetypal thing that he's describing with this king and seeing people. And I actually implemented that with my latest round of quarterly reviews I really extended it. I put a lot more thought and time into it, and I talked to people a lot longer. And to say I'm a king, to me, just seems, inappropriate. But to supervisor and an employee is technically correct. So I implemented that, and I just thought, well, yeah, that is right. That is right. These, especially the younger employees, really want to know, like, how am I doing? Am I meeting expectations? What are the expectations? I don't know. I'm new here. And so it was really great to clarify the expectations, especially for the new employee. Okay, done.
Well, that's very cool. And I would just say that um, to the extent that the book kind of resonated with that experience of yours, that's a powerful takeaway from the book. Um, I would also say, like, it's almost 7 o'clock now, so I don't think RZ is going to show up. But question, I mean, we're going to meet in 2 weeks. It'll be 2 weeks from today.
It's Thanksgiving.
Yeah, 2 weeks from today is Thanksgiving, so that's obviously not going to happen.
Well, we
Or,
could.
or could it? Do we want to try and do that?
We could. I certainly could. I think I could.
I will be here. I am going to Los Angeles for Thanksgiving, but I'll be back by Sunday afternoon for sure.
I'm fine with it. I'm going to be in Payson, so I'm happy to take up another discussion. What's good for us to pick up at this point?
Yeah, I think, man, I tell you, there's a lot of different directions we can go. I mean, RZ may want to talk about the King, Warrior, Magician, Lover part next in 2 weeks.
That
We
would be
might.
my first. The first option would be to talk about this book with RZ.
Yeah, that's what I was just saying. RZ might want to talk about it,
Sure.
so maybe we're gonna have to, just do it for another 2 weeks, which we've done. Wouldn't be the first book that we've extended more than one set of meetings. And indeed, I loved your what you said, Orville. And I've actually kind of written some notes, and maybe maybe I'll shoot you back a comment, and we'll just kind of go like that. And I'll just say the other thing after that, if that, I think it's time to, like, ask ourselves, okay, are we like a book club, or are we a reading group, or how are we going to proceed? But I don't need to talk about that tonight. I'm just saying that I feel like about once every 3 or 4 times we meet, it's good to, like, check in with, why are we doing this? what are we trying to achieve? I mean, we don't have to do it every time, but every couple of times, we just have a meeting where the only agenda is just us. And what are we about?
So I'm all about being involved with the Zen Buddhist group that Rick Zahner is proposing. Basically, he's saying he's a Zen Buddhist, right?
Right.
I'm all over that. I mean, let's do it. Let's do this Zen Buddhist meeting. Okay. Just yeah.
All
That's
right.
my-
Well, like I said, I'm a Christian.
Ed, you have to recognize that I identify as a panentheist, and Gordon is a mystical
mystic.
Christian. So your Zen Buddhist group has two people who aren't Zen Buddhists.
So I'm
But
following.
But I'm actually interested in the mystical parts of Zen Buddhism. Because I'm not that fixed on the Christian part. I just like the mystical aspect.
Well,
I
mysticism
like,
shows up in every religion.
Yeah, it does.
I like anytime Rick Zahner points out some text anywhere that supports what he's talking about. And when he points out the third patriarch of Zen Buddhism from Japan, I mean, my heart is like delighted. I'm eating that up.
All right. Well, we'll I'd say like after Thanksgiving we'll talk about it.
All right. All right.
Eating
Like,
that up, yeah.
Somewhat like the Democrats.
What's that? Okay. All right.
Somewhat like the Democrats. All right. Well, it's after 7 o'clock. I've got things I got to do, so I'm going to check out, and I don't know where RZ went.
Well, I enjoy your emails, both of you, Orville and Gordon. I read them, and I know RZ puts his input in there every now and then, so I enjoy listening to the conversation. So thank you for including me.
It's all good. All right. Very good, you guys.
Good night.
All right.
Good night.